All right, so it is 3 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the tech background before we get going here too far. Thank you all for attending. This is the Good for Quail, Good for Pollinators presentation. This is on the Whova platform. It's a Zoom window on there. Most of you have probably attended a couple sessions, so you're familiar with it, but if you're not familiar, there should be a window on the inside of the Whova app that has the video playing. And if you're on a mobile device, it may be good to turn your screen sideways so you have it horizontal, because this is a PowerPoint presentation, so that'll be a lot easier to see the screen. And of course, we'll be taking chat and Q&A as you come up with them. We'll answer them at the end, or Josh will answer them at the end. If you want to put them in the Whova chat to the right of your screen, that is probably most ideal. Otherwise, the chat button at the bottom of the window works as well. I will be checking on all of them and then going from there and answering them. And again, this is going to be recorded. If you have attended sessions already, all of our sessions yesterday are recorded and are up on the session page, on the recordings page, and we will get the rest of them from today and tomorrow up soon too. And then they will live on our YouTube over time. For people that have tickets, they'll be up there right away. I think we'll have them released to the public, in about a year or so. But without further ado, I would like to introduce Josh Marshall. Josh is a Farm Bill wildlife biologist with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. He works in North Central Missouri, assisting landowners with implementing conservation practices on their property in order to reach their conservation goals. Josh also provides education and outreach to his local community through pollinator and wildlife habitat workshops. He enjoys working and hunting on his family farm with his wife and father. They are always finding new projects to complete that will benefit wildlife, particularly quail and pheasants. Today, Josh will talk about pollinator habitat and its benefits to quail, pheasants, and other wildlife. So without any further ado, take it away, Josh.
All right, thank you, Zeb. As Zeb said, my name is Josh Marshall, and I work with Quail Forever and Pheasants Forever in Missouri. And so I'm glad I can be here and talk to you a little bit about why pollinator plots make great habitat for quail. So the question we get quite often is, why does Quail Forever care about butterflies, bees, and pollinator habitat? And to answer that is because pollinators play a very important role in not just quail, but in all wildlife. And so the components and structure of a pollinator plot help wildlife as they go along throughout their different course in life. And so I'm going to kind of explain how this affects quail and pollinator or quail habitat. So through our mission statement, Quail Forever is dedicated to the conservation of quail, pheasants, and other wildlife through habitat improvement, public access, education, and conservation advocacy. Today, we're going to focus on the habitat portion of our mission statement. So we focus on habitat improvements to reach our goals and the goals of the landowners that we're working with to restore wildlife on the property. We don't focus on predator control because there's a lot of elements that go into predator control, and there's a lot of different things that kind of affect that. And then we also don't focus on controlling the weather because we can't control the weather. So we can't choose when it rains, we can't choose when it snows, and so we focus on what we have direct control over, which is habitat. And so we can improve and restore high quality habitat through the use of pollinator plots, because pollinator plots are native habitat. And they provide essential needs to quail and all wildlife. So I know we're at the Birds and Bees Festival, and a lot of folks probably know what pollinator plots are, but it always helps to kind of explore what they are and specifically what I mean when I'm talking about pollinator plots, because I'm going to be coming at it from a USDA and a state cost share kind of perspective and what we mean when we putting together a practice for a landowner. So to us, or what we mean by pollinator plots, is it's a diverse mixture of native forbs, legumes, and grasses designed to benefit native pollinators. Typically, it contains an emphasis on native wildflowers, which we also call forbs and legumes, or broadleaf plants. We have a normal standard, because if we're making this for landowners, we have to have standards to follow. And so our typical standard is a minimum of 20 native forbs in the mix, and up to 25% of the mix, it can be short native grasses. We also create highly diverse mixes, which are 50 plus species, and it can be more than that, but this is the standard that we shoot for when we're working with these landowners. It's three species in each bloom period, because we want to ensure that there's a food source for the pollinators when they first come out of hibernation in the winter or in the spring from the winter. While they're going through the summer, they have a food source, and in the fall they can build up a food source to get them through the winter. And it's designed to be beneficial to native pollinators. So it contains native plants, and it's going to be like a mix in southeast Missouri would probably be pretty different looking than a mix in Nebraska, say, because it's all based on the native plants that were originally there on that landscape. So if they're designed with pollinators in mind and designed to benefit pollinators, how do they benefit quail? Well, we look at three essential elements whenever we work with wildlife on a landowner's property, on a farm property, even on maybe a state-run conservation area. And we want to ensure that they have food, cover, and water. Now, water doesn't tend to be a limiting factor here in Missouri. There's lots of sources of water, from streams to farm ponds, even livestock waters are great places for wildlife to get water. But limiting factors tend to do come in the elements of food and cover. And so pollinator plots provide excellent cover and food for quail. So quail, they need three specific types of cover. They need nesting cover. They need elements to build their nests out of. They need brooding cover, a place to raise their chicks. And they need escape cover, a place to hide from predators and to seek shelter from the weather. So on nesting cover, quail require access to food. They need to remain hidden from predators, and their nests need to remain hidden. And they need shelter from the weather. So all three of these can be found in pollinator plots. Insects of all kinds are attracted to pollinator plots, and not just the pollinators. You have insects that need the host plant found in pollinator plants so they can complete a form of their life cycle. And then there's predatory insects that come into pollinator plots to eat and complete their life cycle. And so all these are attracted there and provide something for the adult quail to eat while it's sitting on the nest. The grasses and forbs that make up a pollinator plot provide excellent nesting material. It gives them what they need to burrow in and build a nest, which then in turn hides them from predators and provides shelter from any rain events that may be coming in and protects the nest. Once the eggs begin to hatch, with the nest already in pollinator plots, it provides an easy transition to what we call brooding cover. So quail chicks are very tiny when they hatch. They're about the size of an average human thumb when they first hatch from an egg. And they have very specific cover requirements. When they first hatch, they can only run, they can't fly. And so that makes them vulnerable in their element, and they need a place to hide. And more importantly, is within about 2 weeks, quail chicks are going to be able to fly. And so they need a protein-rich diet, and they get that protein-rich diet from what we talked about earlier, insects. About 80 to 90% of a quail's diet from when it first hatches all the way up to about 6 weeks old is insects. And this protein-rich diet helps their rapid growth and allows them to reach adulthood. Also, when quail chicks first hatch, they're not fully endothermic. They can't really monitor their body temperature, so they can very easily get overheated, or if there's a heavy rain or a dew at night and it's a cool summer morning, then quail chicks could also perish from the elements there. So the thick broad leaves of pollinator plots found in the forbs and legumes provide overhead cover to the chicks in the form of shade, as well as protects them from heavy rains and dews. These broadleaves also create bare ground, which chicks need and adult quail need to dust themselves in the dirt. And actually, a lot of birds use the bare ground to dust themselves as sort of a mite control, and helps keep them from getting mites and getting their own insects that attack them. The open spacing between pollinator plots. So pollinator plots aren't like your yard. It isn't like a cool season grass pasture. They're very open in the understory, and it allows movement. Quail chicks can't get through those thick, heavy grasses, and they're an easy access to predators then if they can't move. So open corridors allows them to travel through the pollinator plots and allows them to escape predators as well as run down and hunt food. So then it isn't just for chicks and nesting. Pollinator plots also provide hiding places for adult birds. So again, I said as an open understory, your pollinator plots, you're going to have big leafy green plants, and an adult quail is about the size of a softball. And so it gives them a chance to get underneath there, and it provides cover. As the summer months go along and we move into the fall, a lot of those wildflowers that we see in the spring and summer turn to seed, and those native forbs and lagoons provide winter food for quail. So the quail need seeds to survive the winter. It's how they keep their body temperatures up. It's what gives them energy. And without a food source, they'll starve and die essentially. And so another benefit of these native plants is that they're very robust and they don't get covered in a snowstorm. And so quail have very, very weak feet. And so if there's even an inch of snow on the ground, they can't dig through the snow and get to the seeds that are underneath the snow. They need something that stays above the snow and gives them access to food. And that's what these native plants do, is they hold onto their seed, they stay above the snow, and it gives quail something to eat. When you combine a pollinator plot with what we call woody cover or even shrubby cover, so shrub thickets or edge feathering, kind of some lightly stacked, almost like, not quite like a brush pile, but similar. This is where a quail seeks shelter in the wintertime from predators and seek shelter from weather. And then they leave that shelter in the wintertime only to go out and feed and come back. So when you can combine that shelter, that woody cover, with a pollinator plot, that's less energy they have to burn, because they aren't running out to go long distances to get food. They can get it right there and they can return. So it exposes them to the elements less and exposes them to predation less. So you can see that from before even a quail chick has hatched and an egg is, just as soon as the egg is laid, pollinator plots play an important role in a quail's life. It helps them through their entire life cycle, going from a tiny chick about the size of your thumb all the way up to an adult quail into the next year's hatch. So they're very important in a quail's life cycle. But it's more than quail as well. So grassland songbirds benefit in a similar way as quail, in that they need grasses to nest in, they need bugs to feed themselves and to feed their young. And so pollinator plots are beneficial to them, especially in an urban setting. So you probably won't see quail in the middle of St. Louis or around Kansas City, but grassland songbirds tend to use those elements more, and other birds use those elements as well, those urban areas. And so having a local pollinator plot provides them what they need within the city to complete their life cycle, as well as what they need in the rural area. Turkeys utilize pollinator plots. They also have broods, and they need insects to feed their young. Now, turkeys can use woods a little bit more and woodlands more than quail do, but pollinator plots, especially in fragmented areas like in North Missouri, where there's more open field than there is woodlands, provide an essential part of a turkey's life cycle. And then the adult turkey as well, they'll eat the small young plants as they're coming up, and so it provides the adult turkeys with food aside from the insects. Deer definitely use pollinator plots. Before the rural landscape was covered with agriculture and row crop, deer ate native plants. They ate forbs, legumes. They browsed on all this, and that's how they survived and lived. And so pollinator plots provide an excellent source of high quality plants to deer and other wildlife, from rabbits to just about anything you probably think of. They all benefit from having a pollinator plot. And so that's why we as Quail Forever put a lot of focus on these. When we're implementing a plan, we try to find a way to implement some type of monarch of pollinator plot that can work in with the landowner's goals to benefit his wildlife on the property as well. So in summary, native pollinator plots benefit quail by providing them their needs for their life cycle. Pollinator plots are an excellent source of high quality native habitat, and it's definitely something that we'll keep working with, and we love working with. So as Zeb said, we have the ability to take some questions, and I'll also put my contact information in our staff map on the next slide, so everyone can see and contact a local biologist in their area if they have more questions. So thank you for joining the Birds and Bees Festival, and I hope you guys continue to enjoy your time here.
All right. Thank you, Josh. And that is wonderful information for everybody to have. It's always good to hear promotion of pollinators and native plants and how they affect our birds. And it's great to know that there are plenty of people throughout the state that can help you with this and enrolling in some of these programs. As Josh mentioned, that there are programs out there to help you. So our first question is from Katie, and she asked, how many days do quails incubate before the eggs hatch?
You know, that's actually a question that I can't think of off the top of my head. But if you shoot me an email, I'll find you the answer for that one.
I had a couple great presentations, and thank you for doing this. And then one other question is, how are the quail doing in Missouri? So I guess that's probably in general. How are quail numbers this year, or over long terms?
We've been seeing some ups and downs. Each year we do get a chance to help the National Bobwhite Conservation Initiative do fall and spring surveys on quail and do different whistle surveys. And so in places where we've done a lot of habitat work, we're seeing great response from quail. Even with some severe winter storms, or even with a very wet spring, where we have an area just south of Chillicothe called the 2C area, where a lot of landowners have worked really hard and actually put in a lot of pollinator type plots. We call them CP38s, and it is very forb heavy, and they're seeing a great response from quail there. And so overall, I'd say the quail numbers are doing all right where there's habitat work. Part of my job is I do a survey in the control area around that 2C area, and I've noticed that where there hasn't been, it's mostly hay fields and row crops where I do my survey. And the first year that I started doing it, I heard quite a few quail. And over the past couple of years, I haven't hardly heard any in that area. And there's just not the habitat for them. So where we're seeing habitat, we're seeing good response. And where there's not as much habitat, we're not seeing quite as much response. So I'm eager to see how they respond with this past winter. We did have some hard snow and ice up here in North Missouri. And so I'd be curious to see how well they survive, but we're already starting to hear some whistles and see some, so I'm very hopeful on it.
Awesome. Yeah, I've seen a few already this year, and it's always super exciting when you do. There was one that just posed perfectly on a gravel road for me, so I got a couple of pictures of them. And there was the male that was on the road, and then there was the female in the ditch right nearby too, so they were hopefully getting ready to start some more for this year.
Awesome.
We have a question from Marcia asking, can a plot be used in another habitat like a glade, for example?
Yeah, so glades, a lot of the wildflowers that go throughout Missouri are found in glades. And so I would encourage you to work with a local biologist and go out there and see what's already maybe blooming in your glade. And that'll give you an idea of some of the species that'll work there. Definitely kind of that Missouri River boundary, there is a little bit of separation on what species work better in southern Missouri, what species work better in northern Missouri. But a glade is a great habitat for quail and for wildlife, and there's definitely use and a way that you can utilize it to increase pollinator habitat. So It's just working with your local MDC private lands conservationist or a local quail forever biologist to get an inventory of what's there and then look historically what's in those glades and what those glade species are and working to manage it towards that.
Awesome. And just a reminder, I'm sure this map is probably available on the web too. Otherwise, our recording will be up, and you can go back and pause this and look at it for longer too to get the names and emails out there for your local biologist.
Zeb, I actually did get a text message from one of my counterparts. So 23 days is the average incubation for a quail chick. So thank you, Kim, for sending that.
I thought it was going to be something like that. It's crazy how fast birds grow. I mean, it's just crazy. So there we go. We have a good answer for you. 23 days on average, of course. All right. I don't see any other questions, and we are pretty good on time. So I think with that, I will say thank you all for attending, and be sure to stay tuned for the rest of our sessions going on. I think we've got a keynote address tonight, and then Doug Tallamy's tomorrow night. And then, of course, the whole rest of the agenda is available on our website and on the Whova platform. So thank you all for attending, and we will see you next time. Thanks again, Josh, too.
You bet. Thanks, Zeb.